morning, good afternoon, good evening, or it's 2 a.m., go to bed already. Pick your greeting. This is Eagle Eyes on Tech. My name is Nick, or Eagle Falcon. Pick your name. All my friends do. But anyway, I want to start this podcast for a while now. This is the first episode, and I've always had kind of my own opinions about tech that don't really seem to be reflected out there at all. And to me, it just seems like common sense. So, rather than just venting my tech frustrations on my friends, I'm going to vent it on you. And you chose to listen to this. So we're going to see how well this goes. This might be the only episode. We're going to find out. For starters, I want to talk about the new Apple accessories. For those who don't know, there are 3 new wireless peripherals for Macs. The Magic Keyboard, the Magic Trackpad 2, and the Magic Track Mouse, or the Magic Mouse 2. These 3 are all powered by Bluetooth. They all use rechargeable batteries. And that's basically it. The biggest change to all of them is that the average user is not going to be able to get into them very easily. You're going to need flathead screwdrivers to pry open bases and a lot of stuff that's really not user accessible. But anyway, let's start off with the keyboard. The keyboard is now a little bit shorter and much narrower. There's not that cylindrical bulge on the back. It also stands shorter, so the angle's not as sharp. I'm looking at a picture right now. I want to say the angle's only 5 or 10 degrees. It's to the point where there's almost no point to have this angle at all. And I don't like that. I mean, I have a big mechanical keyboard in front of me right now that's part of my main workstation. And it's at 15, 20 degree angle. Probably closer to 15. But the angle that the Magic Keyboard 2 is at, or the Magic Keyboard 1, I guess, it's basically flat. There's really no ergonomic advantage to it. And that's mildly disappointing. But one thing that stands out are the arrow keys to me. And if you actually I think it's the same. I think it's the same height. It's the same width, or would that be the length? Or would that be the width? I don't know. It looks like it would be shorter, but all the F1 key or the F keys and the eject key are all now full-size keys on the top. So actually, I think it's probably the same size. But the thing that stands out like a sore thumb is the arrow keys. It's HP's design. HP's been using this design for a very long time. I have hated HP designs of the arrow keys. I've hated Apple's design of the arrow keys. They switched from one design that I absolutely hate and basically they don't exist to me, to another design that is basically useless and doesn't exist to me. I hate these designs. I don't know anyone who actually likes that design. But anyway, but moving on. iFixit did a teardown of it already because it exists and they have to tear down everything, and God bless them for it. Inside, there's this honeycomb airspace in it. And I can't imagine that if Steve Jobs was still around, that would fly. I mean, with that much space in there, that much wasted air just inside this keyboard, they could easily do some sort of job like Lenovo does with the ThinkPads and put in a water duct system so that if you spill coffee on it, it would slowly drip out the bottom somewhere. But no, instead we just have a honeycomb airspace in there. To me, it stands out glaringly as the company that can make stuff thinner, not making this as thin as they could, which is really, really un-Apple-like to me. But yeah, the basic gist of it is that there's a rechargeable battery in there. It's roughly half the capacity of the iPhone battery. but because of how little power the keyboard uses, it needs a charge roughly every 2 to 3 months, depending on your usage, and it charges via lightning cable. I'd give them crap about not using micro USB like the rest of the world, but it's expected. It's Apple. They're going to use their own internal cable, and they have every right to. I really don't care on that regard. It's just, this doesn't stand out as a beautiful keyboard. The original Bluetooth keyboard that they had for the aluminum one stood out because the actual body of the keyboard was super razor thin, and it was elevated because of the space they had for the battery. That one stood out to me as a very beautiful design. This just looks like every keyboard HP has ever made. So, there's that. I don't see a lot of people buying this for the design. I really don't. But let's move on to the Magic Trackpad 2. It's basically the same thing. It's narrower, or it's thinner. It's at a much shallower angle. I've never really understood the concept of using the trackpad over a mouse. I've never found it as that much of an advantage or something you'd want to do. So, I don't really have an opinion on that. The trackpad itself, though, is much bigger. It looks like the size of a small netbook, actually, which is kind of funny, really. But, it's there. I don't know. I still think a trackpad for a desktop is a stupid idea, but it's caught on, so all the power to you. I'm not one of your fans. And iFix has already done a teardown. And again, just like the keyboard, it's not easy to get into. Not in the least. There's already spots where I can see in their pictures they've got glue holding down the base. The battery looks big. And it's actually a bigger battery than what the iPhone 6... Oh no. What's this using here? It's just under the size of the iPhone 6 Plus battery. It's a 2024 milliamp battery, whereas the iPhone 6s Plus uses a 2750 milliamp. So it's just shy of that, but I'm expecting to probably get about the same battery life. More than enough, and you'd have to charge it every once in a while. But now moving on to the mouse. The mouse drives me insane. One thing I forgot to mention on the other two, the keyboard and the trackpad. They charge by lightning, but the placement of the port makes sense. It's on the back in the middle of the device. So if it's charging, it looks just like a corded keyboard or trackpad. It just goes out the back straight to the middle and hooks up to whatever you're charging to. You don't even notice it. The charging port on the bottom of this mouse, I just gave away the punchline. It's on the bottom. It's on the bottom. To charge this mouse, you have to flip it over or on its side and hook the cable in there. Which means out of the bottom of this mouse, it's unusable. It is flat out unusable if you're charging it. Now, granted, this is only something you have to do every 2 to 3 months. But come on! You're telling me that Apple, the guys who have some of the best designers in all of tech, went and put a charging port on the bottom of a mouse? Are you kidding me? This is insane. What world am I living in where the flippin' charging port for a mouse is on the bottom? It just seems so silly to me. And in the end, you know what I'm willing to bet? Now, okay, actually, let me get back on track. On the mouse itself, basically the design is exactly the same as the previous generation Magic Mouse. Except that the bottom door is gone, and where the latch would be that holds the bottom door on is where the port is. And that's why I'm driven completely insane by this mouse. So again, you gotta use separators, flathead screwdrivers, and melt the glue, pry things off, and blah 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 to get at this battery. And I would argue that This actually makes all three of these, really, in the grand scheme of things, makes this less environmentally friendly than the previous generation. The previous generations, you want to be environmentally friendly? Fine, go out and get like 10 rechargeable AA's and just cycle them through every time they start going low in a month or two. Here, if the battery completely dies out, you have to replace the whole thing. The whole thing. Before, if your rechargeable batteries died, I'll just go recycle the batteries and go get another set. The mouse or whatever is still good. This is not a move to make it more environmentally friendly, like Apple's own website says it is. This is a move to make you go buy a new peripheral when the blasted battery dies in 2 years. And that is obnoxious. And in the grand scheme of things, those who really want to keep using these peripherals are going to go and get the previous generation. That's what's going to make the most sense to them. And that's what really, really ticks me off about this whole thing. The Magic Keyboard starts at $100. Well, actually, it just is $100. There is no other option. The Magic Keyboard's at $100. The Magic Trackpad 2 is at $130. I honestly have no idea why you'd get that unless you really, really want a trackpad over a mouse. That's your choice. And the Magic Mouse 2 is at $80. If it were me and I was getting accessories for my Mac desktop, whether it be a Mac Mini, iMac, or Mac Pro, just save yourself the trouble and just go get a third-party anything like anything from Logitech. Just about all their stuff is Mac compatible, and that stuff's going to be easier to handle anyway. This is really just stuff that it's trying to look good, and I think it sacrifices way too much to try and look good, and doesn't even look that good. But one thing that actually did kind of catch me off guard about this whole thing is not only did the peripherals come out, but so did the new iMac. New iMacs are out, both in the 21.5 inch at 4K and the 27 inch at 5K. Both of these screen resolutions are way overkill. And honestly, the 27 inch at 5K might make actually kind of a cool little TV. But that's a little costly for a TV, so I don't know, kind of up to you. It's a cool little thing. They are using the new 6th generation Intel Skylake processors. I have been telling people who want to go buy a new computer, wait for Skylake. Wait for it to have the new processors. Because one of two things is going to happen. Either they're going to make huge changes to the current gen, or they're going to make huge changes compared to the current gen, or they're just going to keep everything the same, launch it with new processors, and then sell the old stuff at a discount. And honestly, because Skylake's not too much of an improvement, I think it's only like an 8% improvement compared to Haswell, it'd be better just to grab the older stuff if nothing's really changed compared to the new stuff. This, on the other hand, it's 1080... What's going on here? Actually, I'm getting conflicting information here. Because the main screen said that these were at 4K and 5K. 4K for the 21.5, which was really good, and 5K for the 25. Oh, okay, I see now. Okay, so there are still models that are not Retina. So I'm looking at the 21.5 inches right now. I'm still kind of going through all this information. This kind of caught me off guard as I was doing prep, so I didn't prep for this really well. 21.5, you have two models at the 1080p, which is still okay, but it's not really at the full crispness you would expect. You've got a Core i5 on 1080p at 1.6 dual Core i5, which is kind of low, and then a 2.8 GHz quad core i5. All of these have 8 gigs of onboard RAM, of LPDDR3 on board, which tells me that it's not upgradable. They are configurable up to 16 gigs, but even if you get a Pro to take that thing apart, they are not going to be able to upgrade the RAM, and that's a big problem I have with the way Apple's been going with RAM lately. The only one in the industry that's doing that, and it's really obnoxious. Storage looks like it's pretty much all the same across the board. They are using 5400 RPM hard drives, which, that's kind of gross to me. I mean, 5400 RPM, that's the second slowest hard drive you can get. The only way to get slower is to go with a 4200 RPM, and that's only used in, like, ultra small form factor, like laptops and little portables and stuff like that. Like the old iPods, those used 4200s. So 5400 RPM hard drives, that's pretty much the lowest caliber you can go in a full desktop. They are configurable up to a 1 terabyte Fusion drive or 256 gig flash storage SSD. I would honestly start saying, you might get more mileage out of the SSD than you would the actual hard drive. If you really want the storage, since it is a desktop, just hook up an external and never look back. Because 5400 RPM on your main boot drive, you're going to cry every time you boot that thing up. It's going to take like a minute and a half. And that's just kind of unacceptable to me. The lowest end model has an Intel HD 6000 graphics, which are okay. The quad-core model has the Intel Iris Pro graphics at 6200, which are better than okay, but still okay. I wouldn't be doing any heavy-duty rendering on these things. And curiously enough, the front webcam is worse on the lower-end model than it is on the higher-end one, but both of them are still way higher-end cameras than you really need for just video conferencing and whatnot. Audio is the same. The expansion ports are the same. We have one combination headphone jack, we have an SD card, we have 4 USBs, 2 Thunderbolt 2s, and 1 gigabit Ethernet. All fantastic. I am looking right now to see where the wireless, there we are. Wireless, we have 802.11ac, that's fantastic, which is also 802.11 AVG and N compatible, and Bluetooth 4.0, so it's exactly at par. Nothing new that came out of nowhere, but also not behind the curve. And then there's the 4K model, which sits at 3.1 gigahertz quad-core Core i5, which is only 300 megahertz above above the other model. It's not really that much of a boost. I mean, you can upgrade that one, though, up to 3.3 gigahertz quad-core Core i7, which that over the 2.8 quad-core i5 is a bit of a jump and actually might be noticeable. But otherwise, all the options are the exact same. You still have Iris Pro, you still have the same hard drive options, you still have the same camera option. I'm actually kind of torn between the smaller models, the basically the 22-inchers, between the 2 highest end models. And I think in the third segment I'm going to revisit this after I look at the prices and try to build these a little bit. But right now it looks like the middle of the road one, if you can deal with the 1080p, is the best way to go. But still, if you're looking to do any sort of high-end rendering on this, these are not the machines to go. But let's look at the 27-inchers. The 27-inchers are all 5K. There is no lower option on the 27-inch than 5K. Your movies are going to look a little wonky because it's going to be scaling 4K up to 5K, so there might be some little bit of this and that going on there. But, there's that. I don't think it would be that noticeable. I'd really have to see one and really test it to see if I can really notice the difference between a 4K and 5K content, but that would also require me to make my own 5K content. The processor speeds are basically all negligible, except the second and third tier, or the second and first tier ones are both upgradable to the highest end 4 gigahertz quad Core i7 processor. But otherwise, you have 3.2 gigahertz quad core i5 at the lowest end, 3.2 gigahertz quad core i5 at the middle tier, and 3.3 gigahertz quad core i5 at the highest end, which both the middle and the highest end can go up to 4 gigahertz. Performance-wise, unless you're doing heavy-duty stuff, you are not going to notice the difference. You're not even going to notice the difference between 3.2 gigahertz quad core i5 to 4 gigahertz core i7. I guarantee you won't notice the difference unless you're doing something crazy like Final Cut or anything like that, in which case, what are you doing getting an iMac? And the RAM is the same sort of deal here, except there are SODIMM slots. That's interesting. It's not soldered on RAM. 4 gigahertz, there are 4 SODIMM slots that are user accessible. I want to get some looks and see where these slots are. Configurable up to 16 and 32 gig. And these are using 7200 RPM hard drives. Alright, so just right there, the fact that these machines have 7200 RPM hard drives. I have a hard time telling anyone to get a 21.5 inch iMac unless they absolutely have to fit down that model. I especially have a hard time saying go for that when I look at the graphics capability and see all of the 27-inch models have Radeon R9 series graphic cards. The lowest end has an M380, the mid-tier has an M390, and the highest end tier has either an M395 or R9 M395X. I'm not sure of the exact capability of these mobile graphic cards, which are probably using an MXM slot on them, which also means that anyone who's super hardcore about these could probably swap out the card with something else. I'm not 100% certain what the power is on those. I guarantee you're going to get probably close to double what you would on Iris Pro. Alright, and the FaceTime front cam is the same across the board. Audio is the same. Expansion ports are exactly the same as the 21-inch. That's interesting. Normally on the bigger one, they add a few ports that they couldn't fit onto the 21, but here it's exactly the same. 3.5mm headphone jack, SD card slot, 4 USB 3 ports, 2 Thunderbolt 2 ports, and gigabit Ethernet, and etc., etc., etc. I say etc., 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 but it's the exact same stuff. Wireless is exactly the same, and of course it's bigger. So, that's that. There isn't much of a difference that's added here, but the fact that they've upped the ante on the screen resolution and basically said you're pretty much guaranteed to get Retina unless you go for the absolute lowest tier 22-incher is rather interesting. It's all IPS screens, it's all high-end stuff. I want to get a look at the teardown and take a look at the cooling system before I say, complete 100% thumbs up. But it's the same body, so it's going to be the same as the last year's generation, so if there is something bad with the cooling, that these things overheat easy and then have to downclock themselves, it's going to be on the previous generation too. So anyway, I'm going to take a closer look at this, and I will be right back.
Eagle Eyes on Tech.
Welcome back to Eagle Eyes on Tech. I am Eagle Falcon. So, the format I wanted to do for this show goes in 3 segments. Start off with the things I've learned, then do what I like to call computer wars. Comparing head-to-head 2 units in the same caliber against each other. Usually a PC versus a Mac. It's kind of something I've kind of wanted to do for a while, and the results are actually rather fascinating. There's always been this stereotype that PCs are always more bang for the buck than Macs. But that's not the case, and I'm going to prove that today with today's segment. And then afterwards is going to be answering questions and whatnot. Today it's going to be talking a little bit more about the new iMacs after I've just reviewed the teardowns and everything as such. So, as I said, let's get to Computer Wars. Today, I want to pin one of my favorite line of Dell laptops, the Dell Precision, against the MacBook Pro. The MacBook Pro currently only has one model in the 15-inch category. That's the super slim MacBook Pro with Retina display. If you've ever seen one of these things, you would not think it's a professional laptop. You would think it's just, another super slim basic laptop. That's not the case. There's actually quite a bit of hardware in there. And it's actually kind of hard to find a PC comparison to that. And I've found one. And that is the Dell Precision M3800 mobile workstation. Both these machines right now, I would not recommend buying. The reason being is that they both currently have 4th generation Intel Haswell processors in them. So they're both due for an upgrade. It might still happen this year, it might not, but we're going to look for the fun of it, because I did all this research and I think it's really fun. So I have two models here, and I'll include them in the show notes and whatnot. First up, I'm going to go over the Dell Precision M3800. We have an Intel Core i7 quad-core processor at 2.3 GHz per core. It's loaded with Windows 7 Professional. It's loaded with, as I scroll down, the graphic card is an NVIDIA Quadro K1100M graphic card with 2 gigs of onboard RAM. It's a good graphic card. It's not a great graphic card, but it's definitely got some horsepower in that regard, and that's what you want in a professional laptop. You've got a nice 15.6-inch screen. The one I've picked is almost a 4K screen, technically is a 4K screen, at 3840 by 2160. I guess that is a 4K screen, but it's listed here as a 4K 2K, and 4K is a weird thing, because originally 4K resolution was supposed to be 4,000 pixels on one side, then they dumbed it down to 3840, I think. It's weird. Anyway, actually, let me double check to make sure I have the RAM equal before I continue here in this. I think I might have messed that up real quick. I did mess that up. So actually that adds to this and actually messes up the numbers a little bit. So now it's got 16 gigs of RAM in it. It's got the same style of hard drive, 256 gigabytes solid state on the mini card bus. So it's on PCI Express bus. You're not going to get any limitations there. And then, of course, I went with the 91 watt per hour primary battery in the Dell. So that's that. The MacBook Pro is sitting at a 2.2 gigahertz quad-core Core i7 processor. I wanted to try and get that up to a 2.3 so it would be the same, but the next step up is a 2.5. So we're going to have to go with 100 megahertz less. It's got 16 gigs of RAM, 256 gigs of solid-state flash storage. The graphic card in this one, however, is an Intel Iris graphic card, the 6100 series. The price? The MacBook Pro is just shy of $2,000. The Dell is at $2,151. Basically, these things are at par machines, except the Dell has the Quadro graphic card in it, whereas the MacBook Pro does not. The other big difference is the upgradability. The MacBook Pro does this. Its design on the inside is that nothing's basically user replaceable. The only thing you can upgrade on there is the PCI Express solid state drive. And that's it. The RAM is soldered on. You can't replace that. The batteries are glued in, which there's no replacing that. And big no-no on that. Apple really needs to go back to screwed-in batteries if they're going to go with non-replaceable. Because glued in? Really? Why don't I just start taking a flathead screwdriver and trying to pry that out when trying to recycle it? That's just stupid. But, again, we're here to compare laptops, not to rant on Apple again. I could do that for hours on end, and it would accomplish nothing. But like I said, the biggest difference is that the MacBook Pro is not upgradable, and actually it's a lower-end graphic card with the Iris Pro, whereas the Dell has some user accessibility. You can replace the hard drive. There's a space for an actual 2.5-inch hard drive, so you could actually even, if you really wanted to, go with the PCI Express solid-state drive, the 256GB boot drive, and then have another 500 gig, 7200 RPM laptop hard drive in there too. So you have the best of both worlds. You can't have that on the Mac. The battery life, however, on the Dell is going to be worse than on the MacBook Pro. You're probably going to get about double in the MacBook Pro than you are on the Dell, just for the simple fact that there's more batteries in the MacBook Pro, and the MacBook Pro doesn't have a NVIDIA Quadro card sucking power, whereas the Dell does. But anyway, I've talked a lot about the NVIDIA Quadro card versus the Apple one, which just have the integrated Intel. What does it mean? It means that whenever you're trying to do something graphically intensive, like rendering video, playing games, or anything of that nature, the graphic card is touched. The MacBook Pro, despite being a professional laptop, only uses an integrated Intel card. It's just the Iris Pro, which is better than their normal stuff, but it's still integrated Intel. It's very difficult to actually pin down exactly how powerful it is without using benchmarks. So, to the benchmarks, the Intel Iris 6100 has a 3D Mark score of 563. It's very difficult to try and translate that out as to how powerful it is, but it'll get the job done. The thing is that both of these computers have massive high-resolution displays. The more pixels you're powering, the harder the graphic card has to work to do anything. So that's already one problem I've got. This machine already, right off the bat, the MacBook Pro, is using kind of base-tier graphic cards, and it's making it work harder than it has to for that powerful display. The Dell one, the NVIDIA Quadro K1100M chip, scores 973 on 3D Marks. That is almost double the performance. Which, if you're doing anything that's graphically intensive, if you want to try and play games on this machine, the Dell one is definitely the much better way to go. If you're doing any sort of video rendering, the Dell's the better way to go. So, what are the cons with the Dell? For starters, it's $150 more than the MacBook Pro. The other thing that's really surprising is, despite me saying that you can go in and upgrade a bunch, you only have one option. Count them. One option for the processor. And that's this integrated in Core i7 quad-core 2.3 GHz chip. It's a decent chip. You got 37 watts on it. You'll probably also get... It also has an integrated graphic card in it, so you can get some NVIDIA Optimus niceness going on there. But that's it. You also have no option on the graphic card either. You have to have the NVIDIA Quadro 1100M. You can't save money if you're just like, oh, well, I just want this nice machine, but I don't need the graphic performance, and opt out of that. Now, on the flip side, for the MacBook Pro, if you want to get pro-level performance out of this, and you want a higher-end graphic card in there, you have to go with a higher-end model for starters. You have to go with a 2.5 gigahertz quad-core, which isn't the end of the world. You have to go with a 512 gig PCI Express. And then in order to get in order to get the the integrated the higher end graphic card, you have to now where the heck is the option? I went and did all this research, and now all of a sudden the option to even see the price with this higher end card in it is just gone. Where the flip is it? This is driving me insane. Oh. Oh, okay. Oh, they don't even give you the option. It's just there. Okay, so after I was retarded, apparently. So yeah, if you want to get a MacBook Pro with a higher end card, you have to get the next model up, which is $2,500, a $500 increase. Which, it gets you, 300 megahertz of CPU performance you won't notice, and it doubles your flash storage, and that gets you the R9 370X. That card, on the other hand, scores a whopping 1,754 3D marks. Those are rather nice numbers for a laptop. Is it going to be comparable to, like, say, a high-end 20-pound Alienware gaming laptop? No, probably not. It'll compare to some lower-end ones, but it'll definitely get the job done. On top of that, you've actually got air vents on the new MacBook Pro, so it'll actually cool itself decently, unlike the previous generations, which sucked in air from nowhere. So, really, when push comes to shove, it's all really comparable. There's not some huge gap like there was in the past. Nowadays, it actually is much, much closer. Although the screen resolution is sharper on the Dell, there's more user accessibility on the Dell. There's not a whole lot of options on the Dell model. And the unfortunate thing is that all the other Dell Precision lines, whether it be the 4000 series or the 6000 series, they are much chunkier laptops. I like chunkier laptops. Chunkier laptops are easier to fix and have a lot more options. But if you want something sleek, those are your options basically for comparing Dell to Apple. There might be an option here or there inside the HP line. I'll have to get a closer look in there. Maybe Lenovo has one too. But that'll be all for a future battle to look at. For now, the aftermath is that there really is no winner. It's too close to call. And honestly, I think that's the best. When it's that close, that one model has a slight edge but costs more, one's lower end but costs less, and if you go the next tier up, it's way more expensive, a whole $350 more expensive, but you get a lot more machine. That's the best way to look at it. And I think that's great. The only thing I have a problem with is that the vast majority of the MacBook Pro line, for being a professional laptop line, only has Iris-based graphics, which are bare bones basic, is really, really, really infuriating. And for a company that prided itself on helping the creative community and only giving them the basic graphic card in a can is so sad. Maybe I am just missing the old Apple back from 2004 and 2005 that really gave PC makers a run for their money with what they were doing. They really need to step up their game. They're still selling gangbusters. They'll still be fine, obviously. But come on. We deserve better than this. Professionals deserve better than this. They don't want just a system on a chip. The basic generic guts that I'd find from a basic Toshiba in just a pretty case. Well, that's it for this one. Next week, I want to try and take a look at two gaming PCs and see how they compare to each other. But for now, I'll be right back and we'll finish this off.
Eagle Eyes on Tech.
How did I end up here?
Welcome back to Eagle Eyes on Tech. I'm Eagle Falcon still. Alright, this is the last segment. I want to try and make sure this is not an Apple-only show today. I would hate myself forever if the first episode of this experiment was only about Macs. But I still want to talk about this iMac, 'cause it is kind of interesting. First off, though, I want to talk about wireless charging. I don't get wireless charging. It's cool on paper until you actually do it. I have a new phone. I've had it for 2 or 3 weeks now, and it has wireless charging. I even got it with a wireless charger. It came straight from Verizon. Now, this could be because the wireless charger is from Verizon, and I'm judging the whole technology on its face as unfair. But if you can hear this, this is what my nightmare is. The fact that every few seconds to 5 minutes, I hear the wireless charge disconnect and then reconnect while it's on the device. This... Who thought this was a good idea? I've actually woken up a few times to find out that the blasted thing kept disconnecting so often that the phone only charged 10% of its battery, and I had to try and go through the entire day with only 30% of a charge. That is just infuriating. Now I'm going to take this phone off the cradle now so that I don't run into the risk of it just beeping in the middle of this last segment. Alright, so back to the iMacs. I've gone over the teardowns, and it's basically the same cooling system as before. There's one squirrel cage fan in there. It's near the processor. It ducts right over the heatsink and then out through the one exhaust port in the back. You can pin it out exactly. Here's my problem. There's no intake again. Just like with the Mac laptops of the past, there's no air intake. I don't get it. Why does Apple keep doing this? They continue to ignore how physics work. There's only an out fan. You create negative air pressure within it, which means there's less air for the fan to blow out, and therefore reducing the efficiency of the fan as a whole. Clearly they know this, because when they did the Retina display MacBook Pro, they put air intake. It's along the sides. They claim it adds structural integrity to the laptop, even though that's not how structural integrity works. You can't remove metal to increase structural integrity, but I digress. The iMacs suffer from the same problem. So, is this a doom and gloom sort of situation for the iMac? Probably not. The difference is that there probably is some other spaces where it might be able to draw in air that I just can't see on the teardown. And on top of that, at least on the 21 inchers, there's not that much stuff to cool. It's low-end mobile processors or mid-high tier mobile processors. On the 27 inches, on the other hand, there's a lot more to cool. There is a graphic card to cool that pumps out a lot of heat. There is a full desktop CPU that needs a lot of cooling. But I'm having a hard time finding any pictures that show air intake for it. I'm also having a hard time finding pictures of the exhaust as well. It could very well be that the air duct only goes to half the grill vents, and then physics would just naturally draw in air from the slits above that, which might help a little bit. But having air intake being so close to the exhaust means you're going to pump in hot air to then expel the same hot air after you just heat it up a bit. And that... not a great plan. But again, I think this is only be a big problem if you go for the absolute highest end iMac that you're going to be doing high-end tasks on, like gaming, like running Final Cut or whatever else. There's a ton of other high-end apps on Mac that I can't think of off the top of my head right now. And in those sort of situations, you're probably going to be better off with a low-end Mac Pro anyway, just because the Xeons are a better chip than the Skylake-based ones. That's just how I look at it right here. If you are just the average user going for this stuff, I would say either A, go with the middle or high-end model of the 21.5 inch, but a definite must is a solid-state drive. Raw, solid state. Do not go for the hard drive. It's too slow and it's going to drive you insane. Do not go for the Fusion drive. It's going to be slightly faster, but in the end, it's going to suffer horrendously by that 5400 RPM hard drive. Why are they still doing that? They're not even doing that in their laptops. Why would they plague their desktops with it? It makes no sense. It's so out of place. Just go with the SSD and never look back. And if you're going to go for the 27-inch and you're an average user, absolute lowest end 27-inch. And don't look back. That one, I would still get a solid-state drive. I still would avoid the hard drive and the Fusion drive, even though it's 7200. Just because it's a thin all-in-one desktop. You're not going to... If that hard drive goes bad, it's going to be a pain to replace. You'd rather have the solid state that's going to last a long time. And if you need the extra storage, hook up an external to the back. You're going to be so much happier with an external on the back in the end. And just have the solid states on the inside that are going to last forever and it's just going to make the device last so much longer. Not need to worry about a clicking hard drive on the inside. You've got plenty of ports in the back. And again, you're going to get the wireless Bluetooth peripherals with these iMacs. You may want to go around the store and look for a second set. It might not be a bad investment, even some wired ones. In fact, actually, if you were really going to go and get this custom ordered from Apple, there even is an option to get these with wired Apple mouse and keyboard. And that might, in fact, be the better way to go. Even though it might not look as pretty as the Magic Mouse. That Magic Mouse has always been kind of narrow and isn't really good for your hands to begin with. I mean, just thinking about my big sausage hands trying to use that really narrow soap bar of a mouse just makes me want to like crack my knuckles like this. Just, ugh. Makes me feel like they're cramping up. I'm cramping up just thinking about it. You'd be better off going with the wired Apple mouse and the... Oh, okay. You can, in fact, get a wired keyboard. It's just in a really weird drop-down menu. Wow, there's like 1,000 different options for the keyboard. I guess it makes sense, because they have the keyboard for every language. Wow, my prep is terrible today. This is like the 4th time in this entire thing that it's just like, alright, I've prepped for this, I feel ready, and then I go to it and it's just like, oh wow, I found something different. God, my ADD is showing so hard in the middle of this. Let's get back on track. So yeah, that's what I would do. I would just stick with the lowest end of the 27 inches. I wouldn't go any higher. If you really feel the need to go higher because you want those higher end graphic cards, just think if you really need them. Or if you're better off just saving up a little bit more and getting a Mac Pro. That's just all there is to it. On the 21.5 inch, I would avoid the bare basic model with a 10-foot pole unless you are really pinching pennies and you just wanted this thing to be a pretty kiosk display or a digital sign. And even then, there's better options out there for you. So, that's it for that. That's it for Macs. I'm done talking about iMacs. I'm done talking about MacBook Pros. I'm done with Macs today. Finally, I want to talk about something that really, really tickles my little technolust bone inside me. The Asus GX700. This is a laptop that is not out yet. It's a massive gaming laptop. But you take one look at this thing and you see something strange. It's a thick laptop, it's a backlit keyboard, it's everything you expect in a gaming laptop until you look at the very back of it. You notice these weird connections. There's 5 of them, in fact. And they look kind of like quick release liquid valves. And that's because this strange as all heck laptop made by Asus connects to a water block and radiator. That's right. It's a liquid cooled laptop. I have joked with friends forever about, oh, hey, look, let's liquid cool my phone. Hey, let's liquid cool this. Let's liquid cool my tablet. Let's liquid cool my laptop. Nobody was serious when they said they'd liquid cool their laptop. And here it is! It's a liquid cooled laptop. It's really there. How good is it? I don't know. It's not even out yet. It's probably going to be using something crazy like a full-blown GTX 980 in it. It's probably going to have a full-blown Skylake processor when it comes out. It's probably going to be no slouch of a laptop at all, but my God, this thing is so... This is the stupidest thing that makes me so happy. I would never buy this thing for myself. I would never recommend anyone to buy this thing for themselves, just because it's a laptop that you gotta carry around what looks like a 5-pound radiator that hooks up to the back, because if I'm not mistaken, there's no air option on this. Well, it looks like there's a little bit of an air option. It probably won't engage the main graphic card. Well, maybe I would recommend it to someone. If it's got an air option, I might. If there is the option for this thing to be able to work without the water block, even at reduced power, I would recommend it. If you really wanted to spend whatever it would cost. It probably costs slightly less than a kidney, but not by much. Pricing isn't out for it. Pure specs aren't out for it, obviously. This is... I would be stunned if this thing actually exists. This seems like something that Asus showed off in a convention once, and you will most likely never see the light of day again. Just Asus going, hey, look what we can do. And it will probably never, ever, 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 ever happen again. But if it does, if there ever comes a day where I can walk into a Best Buy and actually see this thing set up, I don't know. I think I'd take off my hat and eat it right there. It's so weird. It's so strange and makes me so happy at the same time. I can't wait for this thing to either decide whether it wants to exist or not. And if it does exist, I can't wait to see the teardown of this monstrosity. To see exactly what makes this amazingly thin and bulky at the same time laptop tick. That's it. We're out of time for today. If you want to ask us a question so that next week I can answer it for you to the best of my ability, or just say it on the podcast and make fun of you for asking for it, that probably won't happen because there is no such thing as a stupid question until I ask it. What was I about to say? Oh, right. Email me at eaglefalcontech@gmail.com. And that's it. We're done for the first episode, and I'm going to put my scattered brain to rest.